The overall goal here, remember, I keep reminding you, is that by the time this is all said and done, you're going to be able to look at any population and think about the characteristics of the population, the environment that population is in, how it's interacting with its own environment, and you're going to be able to say, yes, I would expect that that population is evolving, or no, I imagine that that population is pretty stable. There's probably no change in gene frequency happening. That's the goal. So we've talked about the fact that, mutations give you new options. They can cause gene frequencies to evolve. You can cause evolution that way. Getting a big bunch of individuals to enter or exit the population tends to cause the population to evolve. We said that if the population is too small, what can actually cause evolution to happen? This is where I need a pair of dice to just roll. Random chance. Yeah, because if the population is too small, genetic drift can actually change the gene frequencies. We said in order for a population to be stable, we have to assume that everybody's able to mate, that we don't have strong selection preferences, so mating's pretty random. And now comes what I think is the trickiest one, because this has got its own set of criteria. In order for a population to not be evolving, there can't be any natural selection. Huh? So to think about that, we have to actually go back and recall what natural selection is, which means I'm going to flip to this. So, refresher. And we've honestly been talking about natural selection since the very beginning of the year, because we talked about it with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We've talked about it in more general terms. We've talked about it with rabbits. We've talked about it with all kinds of species. But for natural selection to happen, we've got 4 underlying assumptions. Everyone's different. Life is hard. Many die young. Those who have an edge survive. So there has to be some variation in the population. There have to be challenges. If everything's easy, there's no natural selection. If there are more calories than anybody needs, and there are no predators, and there's just no challenge whatsoever, there will be no natural selection. If every single organism that's born survives and reproduces and passes on its genes, there's no natural selection. Because then there's no edge to be had. No edge to be had. Because when it's happening, natural selection changes distributions. It forces evolution. That's what we've been talking about. That said, oh, should I have you listen to it now? Yeah, we're going to listen to it now. So, how many of you can envision a cute baby bird? Aw, okay, I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. Cute baby birds. Lovely, wonderful baby birds. Yay. You know nothing good is going to come after this, right? I'm so sorry. What do you know about baby birds? I mean, they are pretty helpless at birth, aren't they? A lot of them. It's a split. Some species are, some species aren't. Just like human infants are fairly helpless at birth. They can't hold their heads up. They can't go get their own food. A lot of baby birds are the same way. Can't hold their heads up. Can't chew their own food. Can't get their own food. Pretty darn helpless. So we're going to listen to a podcast from the Galapagos Islands. Where are the Galapagos? Have you heard this? No? Okay. You're shaking your head like you're familiar with it. That's okay. Ooh, somebody else listens to Radio Lab. Good. No. From the Galapagos Islands, and the topic at hand is some little tiny finches on the Galapagos, which a lot of people know about because a man named Charles Darwin studied them. And a lot of his observations that led him to formulate the theory of biological evolution came from his observations of these birds. So they're kind of important birds. Kind of cool. I keep thinking in my dreams and fantasies that someday we could do a biology/science club big trip like History Club does to the Galapagos Islands. Oh, it would be like a 3-year fundraising thing. We'd get to go like every 3 years or something. It'd be crazy. I don't know how much money we'd have to raise. $1 bazillion. We would have to sell like donuts and rugs and wreaths and cookies. I don't know what we would sell. But anyway, it's, my little secret dream. So we're going to listen to this podcast. And as we are listening, there are a couple things I want you to do. You knew there was a catch. I'm going to stop the audio about every minute. You can do this right in your notes. And about every minute, I want you to kind of summarize the important bits. You're basically taking notes. Who here is a terrible auditory learner? Me! Me too. Big challenge for auditory learners who go to college. You know what it is? Professor stands up there and goes for 50 minutes. Oh, crap. And you got to just write down the important bits. So consider this 2 things. Help for auditory learners to get more out of something that you're hearing by developing some strategies. I have also posted the podcast to Classroom, so later tonight, if you want to listen to it again for yourself, I can't find a transcript. I thought I could, but I can't. You can do that. So I'm going to, about every 60 seconds, like I said, 60 to 120 seconds, I'm going to stop it. You're going to summarize. We'll discuss a little bit. Some of the stuff that you're going to hear is not pertinent. But at the end of the whole thing, we're going to think about whether or not this population of birds is evolving. There are probably some spoilers in there, but that's okay. We have a bit of a cliffhanger ending. We have introduced flies on the Galapagos. We have beautiful baby birds. And we have parasitic larvae in their nest, crawling up their noses, possibly eating their brains. Ew. Do you think that's a situation? Does that meet any of the criteria for natural selection to occur? I would say life can't get a whole lot harder than parasitic larvae crawling up your baby's nose and eating their brain. I would say that meets the definition of life is tough. Wouldn't you? I would. So, when we come back to our baby bird heroes tomorrow, what we're going to look at is how this might influence their evolution. So there are 3 main ways that natural selection tends to change distributions. No, this is notes. We got like 12 minutes. We can see when natural selection acts on a population, stabilizing selection, disruptive selection, or directional selection. Any of those 3 things can happen. Now the good news is, before we even talk about these, you know what it means to stabilize something. What does it mean to stabilize something? Make it steady. Oh wait, this desk is wiggling. Here, let me fold up a piece of paper and shove it under the leg. Oh, I stabilized it. My friend is really mad and might do something stupid. Let me help stabilize the situation. I'll give them some chocolate chip cookies. I'll calm right down. All comes back to cookies, doesn't it? I'm sorry. To stabilize is to keep things kind of level. So you can guess that stabilizing selection probably has something to do with keeping the status quo. What does it mean if you disrupt something? Shake it up? Throw it off balance? Yeah. So disruptive selection will tend to go for some extreme, if you walk into a room screaming and ranting and throwing things, you're behaving in a pretty extreme fashion. You're disrupting things. Disruptive selection tends to go for extremes. And if you push things in one direction, that's directional selection. So we're going to talk, and we'll see, we might get through more than one of these, but I want to talk about stabilizing selection. So remember, for any characteristic that you can think of, you can make a distribution out of it. We did it for pinky length. We did it for head circumference. We did it for hand span, arm span, height, foot size, I think. You can make a distribution for anything. And if natural selection is acting on a population, and the average is the best possible thing, then you're seeing stabilizing selection. So here's our bell curve. And we've talked about those for quite some time. If we're looking at a population undergoing stabilizing selection, that bell tends to get taller and skinnier. Average is better and better and better. And the extremes are not good. So basically, stabilizing selection means average is pretty awesome. And the best possible example of this happens to be a human example. And that human example comes down to babies. Let's see. There, I can put them there. I can select this and shrink it a little bit. And get rid of the bell curves. And I can line these guys up like this. Now, I want you to pay attention to this baby, and that baby. One of these babies is probably just about dead average. Average for a human infant, full-term human infant, 40 weeks gestation, at gestation, I believe, if I recall correctly, it's like 7 pounds, 1 ounce or something. About the same size, about the same weight as a roasted chicken that you might find in the store. So pick up that roasted chicken, and that's about what the average newborn weighs. And it turns out that being average, if you are a newborn human, is awesome. Fantastic. Best possible scenario. They spend a lot of time with pregnant women trying to figure out how much that baby weighs. There are a couple reasons. Now, this is different than premature infants. Some of you may have been premature. My husband was a preemie. He was this little teeny tiny thing. You'd never know what to look at him now. Preemies have their own set of problems. But if you are a full-term baby, and this is a full-term baby who just happens to be really, really tiny. Really, really tiny full-term humans have some sets of problems that larger full-term humans don't. They have a harder time controlling their body temperature. Sometimes there are some digestive issues. Sometimes there are some muscle tone issues. Not always. My own daughter was in the 6th percentile. She was a teeny little peanut. She was considered low birth weight. She's fine. She's healthy. She's now 98th percentile. We don't know how that happened. But she's gigantic now. Being a tiny baby is not a good thing. So today, when we have a tiny baby, the OB or the midwife or the nurses or somebody takes a whole lot of care to make sure that everything goes right for that tiny, tiny, tiny baby. Because they're at a higher risk of things going wrong and them dying than this strapping little infant is here. So being average is good. Now, like I said, we do a lot of stuff to help little tiny babies these days. 100 years ago, that little tiny baby might not have made it. You're born in a cabin on the Montana frontier in 1917, and you're a 5-pound baby, you may not survive. You're born 1,000 years ago to a, sort of hunter-gatherer / subsistence agriculture family in a who knows what kind of environment, you may not survive. You don't have those additional supports. You don't have that additional help. Being a little teeny tiny baby, not so good for most of human history. Okay, so the bigger the better, right? Bigger the better? So look at this strapping young human. That there, my friends, is a 12-pound baby. Yeah, I'm hoping that was a C-section. I'm guessing that was a C-section, or the mother and the baby might have died. There are enormous risks to being a baby that big. There are risks to the mother. There are also risks to the infant. I actually know of a case of an infant who was measured after death to be over 13 pounds. He died in delivery. It was before they had ways to accurately predict the size of a fetus. They knew he was big. They didn't know he was that big. They broke his collarbone and his neck trying to get him out. There are serious risks to being a huge baby. And that's just the getting into the world. And that was, that would have been in the 1960s. I mean, let alone 100 years ago, let alone 1,000 years ago. You're a woman 100 years ago who has a 12-pound baby cooking, you're dead. Period. You're dead, the baby's dead. There's really no getting out of it. It's that serious. Now, aside from the risks of delivery and birth for the baby and for the mother, that baby has got a much higher risk of all kinds of metabolic disorders. That baby may not be able to produce enough insulin to process the sugar in their bloodstream. That baby, for a whole variety of reasons, without some medical intervention, may not make it. There are enormous risks to being a really large infant. So what do we tend to see? What kind of selection do we tend to see? Stabilizing selection. It is awesome to be average. Awesome! Being average is your best shot at survival in this instance. Being this baby rocks. And I wouldn't say that baby looks terribly unhappy, but being that baby is an awesome place to be. That baby has the best chance of survival, therefore has the best chance of growing up to pass on its genes. Huh. If you know somebody, if there's somebody in your life who knows how much you weighed at birth, ask them. Hey, how much did I weigh? Some of you might already know. Some of you probably don't. And some of you probably don't have access to somebody who would know that. But if you do, ask them, hey, what did I weigh? We could probably generate a distribution of birth weight in here. I suspect it would be a pretty good bell curve. No, we've got a small sample. If we got everybody in the school and asked them birth weight, we would get a better sample. This is a form of stabilizing selection. There is a genetic aspect to birth weight. Mothers who were low birth weight tend to have babies who were low birth weight. Mothers who were high birth weight tend to have babies who are high birth weight. There's a genetic component. Most, and even today, babies over 11 or 12 pounds often don't survive for a variety of reasons because there are other issues that cause them to be that large. And tiny babies, we have lots of support for them, but tiny babies have a much higher risk of death in infancy. Being average rocks. That's stabilizing selection. So man, what a day. We've talked about tiny baby birds with worms crawling up their brains and all sorts of risks for infant death. Ugh.